and welcome very much to this new broadcast on change dynamics. And today we're very happy to have Jennifer Vessels on our show. And that is not for just some reason. The important thing is Jennifer is known for being a global leader for growth and for change. I think we're very happy to have her because she is known as a Chief Innovator at EGA, the Executive Growth Alliance, and she is absolutely good in scaling innovations, and she's also a founder of Next Step Growth. So that makes her an interesting discussion partner for this podcast. And well, one of the things that strikes us is that maybe best illustrated by a quote of Jennifer, and the quote is, "Change is inevitable." And that, of course, is a very nice link to the subject of our podcast, where we talk about change dynamics. And we have the thought that change might be inevitable, but nevertheless, there is some reluctance to change in many organizations. And we wonder why that is. How does this change is inevitable quote is related to the fact that change sometimes is still inevitable, is not happening? So that's where we would like to talk about with Jennifer. So Jennifer, welcome very much to our podcast. We're very happy to have you here. And is there something you'd like to add to my small introductory comment?
Great, thank you. It is an honor and a pleasure to be here. And I think the thing that I would add is that I bring kind of two different angles to this question. One aspect is I have a home in Silicon Valley where there is constant change, constant growth, constant traffic, competition, a lot of activity. I have a second home where I'm based right now, which is in Oslo, Norway, that is known for peacefulness and a lot of beauty, and things don't change quite so quickly. Having said that, in the last 2 to 5 years, we've seen a lot of shifting in attitudes about change, both in Silicon Valley, where there's been significant growth, as well as in Norway, where there's also growth. And the Executive Growth Alliance, as you mentioned, is a global community of leaders, typically from traditional businesses, large companies like Schneider Electric, Novartis, Sutter Health, Wilhelmsen. And these companies have talked about change many, many years. And executives in those companies, both in Silicon Valley, in Norway, in Germany, in the UK, in the eastern areas, they've also said, yes, we want to change. We know we need to be innovative. But one thing sped that process, and that was COVID-19, which demonstrates another quote that I like to use, which is necessity is the mother of all innovation. Mm-hmm. When we have to do something, we do so. And it's been very interesting to watch the speed of change that was going along at a fairly low growing rate for 3 years, suddenly go up in about 3 days across Norway, Silicon Valley, the UK, Central Europe, Africa, East, etc. Very consistent pattern. When you have to do something, you figure out how to do it.
And what sort of resistance or reluctance would then disappear? Because technically, I think you're saying is technically people could have incorporated the change anyway, but there was no necessity, so they didn't. And all of a sudden, the necessity arises, and then the machine starts to tick. So what keeps them from doing that? What is there something human? What is, if it's not technical, what is behind their reluctance to change if there is no necessity? Because there is improvement possible.
Absolutely. And I think in a lot of environments and for a lot of people, there's firstly a comfort zone. If things are good, life is peaceful, you're getting your paycheck, you're going home at 4 o'clock to put your feet up, why take on more hassle to change and grow? It's easy to be comfortable if there is no burning platform or something that is driving you. That's first and foremost. And we see that in some of the more advanced, richest countries, is people tend to be less anxious to take on that extra project. Let's do that new innovation. Let's leave our comfort of our company and go start something new. When it's comfortable, we like to stay put as human beings.
But then a question, if you're talking about the COVID-19 and indeed the necessity of change, that's what we also observe, of course. We saw it also with the millennium bug a long time ago. Everyone thought that the world would collapse. Nothing happened, by the way. So that was a nice thing, by the way. That's why we're still here. But now we have that change pace, that necessity of change. How would companies be able to keep that pace? Because I think listening to some of your interviews and podcasts and presentations, I think you are very much on the level that companies should keep on the pace of change. But how can they keep this pace?
I think there's a couple of ways. And one is going back to your question about what holds people back. One thing that holds people back is comfort zone. Second thing, which goes into that, is fear. Fear of failure, fear of doing something different, fear of looking bad, fear of losing your job because you try something and it doesn't work. Today, having gone through this period of very rapid change, people have recognized that they can change. They had to reconstruct their life to be able to work from home. Yep. They had to shift the business model to digital. They had to learn how to use Zoom and Teams. And it was hard, but they survived. And a lot of people that I interface with are starting to recognize, that wasn't good and fun. But hey, coming out of this, there's a lot of advantages. We gained something as a result of taking that plunge and changing. And so that's a lot of my hope, at least. And what I'm hearing from our members of Executive Growth Alliance, they're saying, we did that. Let's celebrate those wins, but not stop here. Just think of what we can do in the next year when we don't have all of this external stuff of lockdowns and mandates. If we really focus on change for good, we can do some pretty cool things.
But how are you going to get it in place that all those board members, you're talking about board members in this case, entrepreneurs. Now, entrepreneurs I'm not afraid of. The current board members I'm more afraid of, that they don't fall back in their old habit of a business case which is not focusing at the real business value, but more at cost savings, at reducing the number of FTEs, exactly what the big consulting firms always advise to them. How can we stick to that thing that the businesses are keeping focused at the real business value, that they keep the pace of change that they need, also make it much more enjoyable, I think, for a lot of people to work for those companies? How do you see that?
Great question. I think there's two things that I see happening kind of simultaneously. Firstly, a lot of people, especially younger generation workers, and when I say younger, I mean basically from age 40 younger, they've recognized through this pandemic that life is short and we really must focus on working to grow something and impacting the environment, impacting the top line, making a difference, creating as opposed to protecting. And one of the consistent themes I hear from every one of our 85 members in this community is the way we're going to come out of this COVID period is through having the right people and engaging the right people and bringing in the right new talents. So the talent wants growth. The talent wants change. The talent wants building a better sustainable environment. And I see that pushing at the board level, because if you're going to compete going forward, you have to have the right people. And the right people are not willing to settle for staying in a box and being measured by KPIs. That's a big push I see.
Yeah, and is age something that is an element there? And I think it's a strange question from us because we're over 40 and still we very much are in favor of change because it's the only way for companies to survive. So, but is the element of age an issue here?
I wouldn't say so much an issue. It's simply the fact that from my experience, there are definitely people over 40 that want to change, grow, build something and have an impact more and more today. The people under 40, not just simply want to, they demand to. They're not willing to settle. And that I think is an important dynamic. The other dynamic that goes into continuing this change, and it's something we do in EGA, is people have recognized that they need to work together. And by holding each other accountable for change and recognizing that we're in a very integrated globally market, that the boats will continue to rise because one rises that brings the other up.
Mm-hmm. And would you say that the difference that you sometimes described in your lectures between, let's say, Norway and the Silicon Valley is then disappearing?
I wouldn't say so much disappearing, but I would say that Norway is moving forward at a faster pace than where it was. So it's like you have Norway here, you have Silicon Valley here. There's a lot of other places in between. And so Norway and the places in between are speeding in change. Silicon Valley is a very different environment where there is constant change, constant competition, constant influx of new ideas, new perspectives, and will continue, I believe, to be a leader of change and innovation.
If you look at Silicon Valley, the Silicon Valley approach, what are the major aspects that we in Europe, and let's say in the Netherlands, not that much, I think, different from Norway in this case, I would assume. What are the major aspects that we can learn from that?
I think firstly, it is diversity and bringing more ideas, more people to the table of a question. And that's diversity in age, background, perspective, culture, industry, get out of the box and think differently. That's a huge criteria for real innovation that is very much present in Silicon Valley. Secondly is collaboration. In Silicon Valley, somebody has an idea, they want to shift the way they do business, they want to create a new product. The first thing they're going to do is call 5 other people and let's get together, brainstorm it out. Let's figure out how you can help, who you can connect me to. It's a village. It's a collaborative effort. I see a lot in Europe, especially in the Nordic, of I have an idea. Let me go sit in a room and research it and perfect it before I tell anybody about it. Let's shift more to that. Let's embrace. Let's recognize that we can all work together. 1 + 1 = 3.
It's a bit the open source approach.
Absolutely.
And then effectively dividing could mean multiplication.
Completely.
Of course, the thought gets better. And I think what we've seen in most Western European countries is they have these stovepipes in organizations where they very much stick to where they are rather than working horizontally together.
Completely agree. And within the Executive Growth Alliance, we intentionally bring people together into what we call circles, executive growth circles, where 10 people come together to work on a common challenge. And we intentionally ensure they're across industries. So we have Novartis working with Schneider Electric, working with Wilhelmsen, working with Merck, working with Hydro, all on how do we shift culture in our organization, looking at it from different dynamics. And we find that that's highly, highly valuable. It's a different lens.
Do you also do that from, let's say, bringing European managers together with US managers? Or?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And that's within an executive growth circle. There's typically at least 4, if not 10 different countries represented. And at least 4, if not 10 different industries represented to get that shading of perspective.
Yeah, it's talking about sharing a little bit different angle. If I look at I started already with talking about consulting firms. What I still see here is that if a big change starts in an organization, the first thing that the board does, they bring in the large consulting firms and McKinsey, Pricewaterhouse, and somehow they always tend to follow exactly their advice. They advise that's something. I would say, if we want to change that perspective of those boards, maybe we should start with those consulting firms and not with the. What do you think about that? And how could we do it?
Yeah, I think it's a great idea. I would say that some of the challenges even triple-fold, because at least what my experience has been in Europe is people are with the consulting firm for a certain number of years and then they join boards. Yeah. And so you have boards made up of ex-consultants that hire the new consultants. So it stays very insular. It stays very echo chamber like. Yeah. So
if the other way around, that's that some of those board members, then they start to being a partner in a consulting firm.
Exactly. So if you're a leader or a board member of a company and you want to look at how to change, get outside of that silo. Look at how other companies in a similar environment, maybe different industry, maybe different position, look at how they've changed. Yeah. Bring dialogue into the equation to learn from others.
Do you have an idea how we could get this to work? Yeah. Because I see it a lot. We still, one of the things we validated also is the number of change programs actually that fail. And it's very, very simple. You can see the numbers, but more than 70% of the change projects and programs, they fail. Yeah? And they fail completely. So there's a lot of money is thrown away. Most of the things, our observation there is that we think that most of it comes because you might have a clear goal, but you don't have a clear business value purpose in those cases. And that obviously leads to resistance with the people who are executing or having to implement that change, etc. So we think that it's very important that the board of directors in companies start to understand that they are pushing the companies with the wrong perspective, with the wrong purpose.
Yeah.
Is that something, how would you see that? How would we be able to change that?
Yeah, so one of the things I've observed and has come out very clearly in executive growth circles is a change project that starts from the top, whether it's from the board or the CEO that says we need to change, and they push down through the organization. That has indeed a 70% likelihood of failure. Yeah. Because an organization, whatever industry you're in, an organization is made up of people. Yep. And we as people certainly do not like to be changed. I mean, we have resistance to changing, but we have a very strong objection to being changed. Mm-hmm. So instead of that top down, I would suggest the board works with the leadership team to bring members of the organization, bring the employees into the process.
Kind of a
and do it with them. Yeah. Exactly.
Vertical collaboration.
Exactly. As people have demonstrated, when it's necessary to do something different, we can. Yeah. But we want it to be our choice. We want to see the what's in it for me as opposed to being changed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There you touch upon one of the things that we often see in the practice that we have is that if you link with the interest that people have in the goal that they have in your change project, they will come along.
Absolutely.
And, exactly.
Yeah.
This is often forgotten, and thereby projects do not often succeed as much as we'd like, because the 70% is something that we found with the Chaos Group. You probably know, Jim Johnson was on the show as well, and we've seen that the number is astonishing, because you would say if you only turn that around, the 30% would fail. That would sound more normal.
Yeah, exactly. And when I can honestly say in 2 years, and a lot of major changes within these corporations, every time a leader has pushed it down, this is the strategy, this is the way we're reorganizing, we hired the consulting firm and this is what they said we should do, it has failed. 100% failure. Versus when they have said, we hired the consulting firm and this is what they said, now team, let's work on what we think about that and how we might implement something from what they said. And let's get people involved. Ask questions, not state what needs to be done.
Yeah, then you get more the bottom-up approach, and the acceptance then grows.
Exactly.
Okay. I think we're running again to the end of the of your presentation and your lovely company in our podcast. Is there something like a closing statement that you think of that you could share with us? Something that we can take home with us and think about when we wake up at night and say, this is what Jennifer said. She was right.
Well, I think what I would like to leave you with is what I call peace.
Yeah.
And that is an integral part of how we work with companies to help them change and help them work together in EGA. And that piece is you've got to first have perspective. You need to change. There will be positive that comes from it. So perspective, you need to explore.
Yeah.
There isn't a perfect rule book on how to change and grow after a pandemic in 2021. We're writing that rule book. So E for explore, try things. A for action. It's not about talking about it. It's trying it, doing it. C is collaboration. Get out of your silo. Don't do it in a vacuum. Talk to people, get other ideas. And E is for empowerment, by bringing the team members into the change process, helping them to feel as though they're defining how they're going to change, as opposed to it being done for them. So peace, perspective, exploration, action, collaboration, and empowerment can build a better future for your organization as well as for yourself.
And don't be afraid to fail.
Absolutely not.
Yeah. Well, I must say, there's a very peaceful thoughts for my when I go to sleep. I will think about that, and I will be very peaceful indeed. Thank you.
Well, we're going to do that, Dion, because otherwise you have to take action.
Yeah, the action is there as well. Yeah,
you won't sleep that well.
Okay, good.
Sorry.
Well, Jennifer, it's lovely to have you on the podcast, and we'd like to thank you very much for sharing your valuable thoughts with us. And we hope to see you again and wish you the best of luck. And again, thank you very much for being with us today.
Perfect.
Thanks
Thank you. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jennifer.
Pleasure for
Goodbye.
us too. Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye.